ये देख के अच्छा लग रहा है कि इतना स्वादिष्ट खाना खाने के बावजूद भी सब कोई सो नहीं रहा है यहाँ पे, और अभी सरस्वती ने सबको शायद जगह दिया हो. So because this is a Gurukula discussion, I want to actually give a few examples of how our system of teaching has been traditionally, and how what we can actually learn today from our system, traditional system, and some of the values that we might have forgotten, but how we can actually bring them back into our modern education system so that our teaching can become more effective and all. So I think will be bit examples, 3 or 4 different examples, and then we'll have some dialogue between us. Now, as Anilji also told you, and as all of us know, that India's education system through several thousand years has always been based on number of different kind of characteristics. One of them, of course, today we talk of inclusivity, but Indian education system has always been inclusive, where large number of pupils, irrespective of their backgrounds and all, or irrespective of their physical state or whatever, they were always taught what the Guru knew and taught to them. Indian education system was not only inclusive but also was very experiential, and then I will tell you a little bit examples of those, what is experiential things actually mean. But India's education system, after I highlight at this moment, was also very interactive. See, one of the things that we have kind of forgotten today is the fact that younger pupils must come forward and ask questions, and it's only through the dialogue between the students and the teacher that we can actually not only impart knowledge, but a teacher can also enhance his or her own knowledge through this dialogue. It cannot be always guaranteed that a teacher knows everything, but through dialogue, the knowledge always goes ahead through the questions that the pupils ask and through answers that the teacher gives. Now let me give you an example of this particular point. Right? The dialogue is the one that we will principally focus on today's this thing. So all of you have heard of Rishi Yajnavalkya? All of you have heard? The Upanishads mentioned Maharishi Yajnavalkya. He was one of the greatest Maharishis who knew apparently many different things, and some people thought that we should go and ask Yajnavalkya questions and try to see whether he is able to answer them. And some of the impossible questions, what they were thought would be impossible to answer. And there are 8 people who are mentioned in Upanishads, 8 principal people who went and asked him questions. But one of the most prominent ones was Gargi. Right now, that also good moment as I say Gargi, you will see inclusivity already coming in. And Gargi was chosen to ask him a question, and Gargi asked Maharishi Yajnavalkya that we can see the sky or the heaven, we can feel the earth below us. On the top there is sky, below is the earth. What is there in between? You know, and Yajnavalkya thought about it, and Yajnavalkya actually answered that there is Akasha. So the concept of Akasha, which is one of the 5 what we call as tattvas, actually comes from the dialogue that ensues between Rishi Yajnavalkya and Gargi, that Akasha is nothing but the void that is created between and which is infinite. And in modern times, some people have tried to equate that to what is called as ether. You know, so some people have tried to interpret that as ether or something like that. But we know that Akasha is one of the 5 important tattvas that we know. The 5 tattvas that we talk of, and the concept of infinity comes from Akasha. But this actually came because of the dialogue between different people. And dialogue has always been an integral part of Indian knowledge system. Right? Even when the new universities began, Takshashila, Nalanda and all, the principal thing was a dialogue between different people. And knowledge was always taken forward with this particular dialogue. In the modern system, we call it as a peer review. When we say peer review, that somebody proposes an idea, that idea is sent to a few other people who know a little bit about that field of knowledge. They give their opinion, and that opinion or the questions or the criticism that is raised is given back to the person who has floated the idea, and that person tries to address that in the best possible way. That's what we call peer review. But dialogue between different people has been integral to Indian knowledge systems. I want to give a second example. You have heard of great mathematicians. Anilji mentioned about how mathematics, astronomy and all were very well developed in India. There is a school of Aryabhata, there is a school of Brahmagupta, and so on and so forth. In the 12th century, there is a very famous mathematician called Bhaskaracharya II. Right? He was born in Bijapur, today's Bijapur area. Most of the work was done about 150 kilometers north of Pune. His place called Patan Devi. There is a temple there. And he actually eventually went to Ujjain and practiced most of his mathematics. The modern algebra that we think about, right, multiple different kind of equations, including polynomials, they have been mentioned in what Bhaskaracharya actually wrote about. So he has written a few treatises. One of them is called Bijaganita, other one is called Lilavati. And then some more that he has written, Siddha Shiromani and all those things. But these two are fantastic treatises that Bhaskaracharya wrote called Bijaganita and Lilavati. This actually came once again because of a dialogue. Right? So his daughter Lilavati was a widow, and she became widow at a very young age. And then Bhaskaracharya thought that she must not sit idle, and therefore she should be challenged all the time and challenged intellectually. And he came up with many different kinds of problems. Right? So many number of bees were there on a tree. Out of them, some went to this direction, some other went in a direction, one came back, so many did not come back, and all kinds of things. In the end, how many bees were actually on the tree at the end of the job or something like that. Or about certain elephants, they were drinking water, and one of the elephants gave birth to another small elephant, baby elephant, and so on and so forth. Large number of problems in modern arithmetic are stated in Bijaganita, and some of the quadratic equations are also stated in Lilavati. So they are very fascinating because they were the dialogues between him and Lilavati. And that's really the beginning of modern algebra as we see it today. Now that has been acknowledged by multiple people, including people like Fibonacci. All of you have heard of Fibonacci, the 12th century Italian mathematician. If you have not heard of Fibonacci, you have at least heard of the Fibonacci series, right? The Fibonacci series is named after Fibonacci. So Fibonacci also has acknowledged about Bhaskaracharya's work, has acknowledged about the decimal system being invented in India, and also has acknowledged that the numericals that we write today, what we call as Arabic numericals, are actually have been invented in India. Right? So but Bhaskaracharya's work, of course, is prominently acknowledged as one of the early works in arithmetic and other related areas. Coming back to the point that these dialogues were very important between the teacher and the pupils is an extremely important point. And that the kind of dialogues, the reflection of that, we also see in Bhagavad Gita and so on and so forth. The dialogues between Bhagavan Krishna and principally Arjuna, but other people also, that how these dialogues actually went about. And where curious questions were always asked, and the person who was supposed to be learned answered them. Right? So this actually is a very important aspect of Indian knowledge system, and we must practice this in our classrooms. Right? And how do we practice in our classrooms? We have to learn to challenge the students in a classroom. First, state a small problem, and then try to show how to solve the problem, and then go to a more complex problem, and then ask the students, if you were given a chance to solve the problem, how would you solve it? And there is no single universal answer to many of the problems that we state today. And children actually can come up with very novel ways of solving a problem that we even might not have thought about. And that's the way if we actually challenge the children to think and come up with solutions to the problems is actually a much better way of teaching than simply sitting on a blackboard and trying to write down problems and their answers and so on and so forth. And this in science today, in the modern times, what we call as experiential learning. All of you have heard of the word experiential learning? And in the NEP 2020, which is a transformative document for Indian education system, a lot of emphasis is put in science education on experiential learning. What we want to do the children to do is not simply learn from the books or from what teacher teaches in a class, but learn by doing things and learn by asking questions and try to learn by answering the questions in novel ways. That's exactly what we want the students to do. And that's, if our teachers, all of us can implement that, that would be phenomenal. Now we see reflections of experiential learning all around in Indian archaeology. Right? I mean, some of the remnants of past structures that have been either dug up, or we see around us, whether it be temples, whether it be cities or whatever, we actually see this experiential learning in that. How? Let me tell you. I'll give you two examples once again and I will stop and then I will take questions from all of you. If you go to Himachal, which is not very far from here, there are many temples in Himachal which have been constructed on a style which is called as Kathkuni. I don't know how many of you have heard of Kathkuni style. Have all of you heard of it? Has anyone of
Yes, sir.
Kathkuni style? Sure. कहाँ पे देखा है आपने Kathkuni style टेम्पल कभी देखा होगा?
गोलजू टेम्पल के आगे सर।
कहाँ पे?
गोलजू टेम्पल।
ओके, वहाँ पे Kathkuni। और किसी ने देखा है? साराहान में एक है, या फिर पराशर जो हो गया, लेक पराशर जो मंडी के सामने जाके, वहाँ पे जो टेम्पल है ऋषि पराशर का, that is made in Kathkuni style. Now what is Kathkuni style? Kathkuni style is the one in which you have wooden beams, right? And wooden beams are not directly one to another. There is wooden beam here, there is another wooden beam here, and in between you have layers of rocks, cut rocks. Right? So you have rocks or bricks which actually fill the space between the wooden beams. And they don't use mortar, right? To bind the wooden rocks, you don't use chuna or any kind of cement or any kind of, in those days people actually used to use mortar made up of lentils and good and other thing, but even that is not used. Now why am I mentioning Kathkuni is because this style evolved a period of time. It was not discovered probably by one person, it was discovered by multiple people over a period of time, and it probably evolved by the way knowledge was transferred from generation to generation. Alright, that's what we believe, that the architectural knowledge was passed between different generations of architects. And why is it important? It's important because if I tell you that one of the deadliest earthquakes India or South Asia has ever witnessed, one of the deadliest earthquakes, is the earthquake of 1905, what is called as the Kangra earthquake. And the Kangra earthquake actually made very serious damage to multiple properties. A few tens of thousands people died in the earthquake, but there's a huge damage to many structures. What stood strong and did not fall was the Kathkuni temples. They did not fall. And what happened? Simply by the knowledge that you don't use mortar between different layers of stones, so that when the building is shaking, you have enough shaking space for each layer of the stones and so on and so forth. We have forgotten the style, we have forgotten what our ancestors taught us, and we started making concrete buildings. If you go to Shimla today, it's a jungle of concrete, and if you look at it, we just pray to the God that we don't get that kind of an earthquake in at least our lifetimes, in places like Shimla. So that's kind of thing. The second example I want to give, and I will stop there, is all of you have heard of Kailasa temple in Ellora? Ajanta in Ellora, have you heard of? Yeah? The Kailasa temple?
Yes, sir.
That's an amazing piece of art. That's an absolutely amazing. How many years it would have taken to build a Kailasa temple? At least 100 years. At least 100 years. It is carved out of a single rock. A single rock, and it's an absolute wonder of man-made structures anywhere in the world. I would say one of the best structures that human beings have ever made in history is the Kailasa temple of Ellora. Now 100 years in those days would be at least 3 generations of people, if not more, right? And had been made out of pure devotion. Now imagine somebody who might have imagined what kind of temple it would be, what structure it would be, what intricate art that would be actually carved on the pillars, and what would be the temple devoted to, how would the temple eventually the final form look like, is mind-blowing if you think of it today. Today, we are in a position that nowhere in the world we will be ever able to make a structure like this. What we made several hundred years ago, today we are not in a position to make such a kind of thing which will actually transcend multiple generations. And this would not have been possible once again without collective effort of multiple artisans and transfer of knowledge from one group of people to another people, and once again through dialogues and not on a piece of whiteboard or a blackboard, and simply by actually discussing continuously between multiple different kinds of people, that was made possible at that particular temple. So dialogue, I will come back to it, is an essential ingredient of our education system, and we as teachers must ensure that we have meaningful dialogue in our classes, right? So the conversation should never be one way, but it should always be 2 ways from both. And many times we'll be surprised that we ourselves can learn something new from the younger kids. Now this is the philosophy that has been brought in NEP 2020, and you would see those of you who teach in schools, the different standard books that are coming out now, you would actually see that how much emphasis has been put on either experiential learning, or for children they can do things at home and things like that, and come back to the class and tell the teacher what the child has learned by doing things with his or her own hands, either at home or somewhere else. And that's the emphasis that has been put in NEP 2020, and I do hope that all of us in this room will take NEP 2020, the spirit of NEP 2020 forward in the correct way. आज सुबह मंत्री जी ने कहा कि ISF के पीछे का भाव क्या होता है, उस भाव को समझना जरूरी है। उसी तरह हम सभी लोगों को NEP 2020 जो 2020 की नई शिक्षण प्रणाली जो आई है, उसके पीछे का भाव समझना बहुत जरूरी है, और अगर हम ये भाव समझ पाएँ तो I have no doubt that our country's future is very bright. What I want to do is, I don't want to speak anything more, but if there are a couple of questions that we can take, is it possible to take some questions? Yeah. If somebody would like to narrate a story, or somebody would like to ask a question or something, I would like to encourage you to do that. Yeah, आप जोर से कहिए, मैं रिपीट मैं दोबारा करूँ.
My question is that what are the appropriate ways to introduce a problem to kids so that they're
Yeah, so the question that she's asked is that what are the a problem or a question, so that students can actually start pursuing the question either in their own way or whichever way. Now, we had also realized the thing in this particular one, that what Anji said just a while ago, that we are living in the age of AI, and if we ask students to find out something, they will very quickly do it using their mobile, But that's reality, and I don't think we can shy away from reality. We have to actually make use of that particular aspect as well when we state a problem. So typically, for example, when I am teaching in a class, just one example, when I ask student to distinguish between living systems and non-living systems. Alright, I don't give them answer and there is no single universal good answer to this problem. But I allow students to think and come up what are the characteristics of living things which are not present in the non-living things. Right? And invariably students come with something that moves. When I ask water also moves and plants don't move. I pose something very interesting, right, as a question that the student would be compelled to think about that particular problem and come up with an answer which may be right, which may even be wrong, doesn't matter. Right? We are not penalizing students for giving wrong answers. It's a learning process. And what we are actually inculcating into the mind of a student is a thinking process which is rational.
As you have mentioned, sir, about the brilliance of the ancient architect, and I have come from a place, Jaisalmer. You might have heard about the Golden Fort, Jaisalmer. And you will be surprised to know that such a big structure has been made without any binding things. That means only interlocking has been used, which was known at that time. Second, there is one Hawa Prol there. The entire city you will not find the wind blowing, but if you go and sit at that Hawa Prol, the direction, it's so beautifully designed that the wind will always circulate from that part. So that was my story to share with you, so most of the people can. Second thing, sir, whenever we have the books, now no doubt NCERT has brought up the new books, Curiosity, for kids in 6 to 10. But most of the books which are the private publications, they don't develop that curiosity, they finish the curiosity before developing the curiosity. So my suggestion is at that higher stage, something can be done from your side.
That's exactly what we are doing. So curiosity, of course, I was the person who was involved in writing 8th standard curiosity. So that's exactly our approach is even for the higher classes, we'll come up with books which are very similar in which students learn from experiences rather than actually teaching like what you said in private time. But architecture wise, I mean, of course, thank you.
मोनोलॉग हो गई थी, केवल शिक्षक बोलते थे, बच्चे सब सुनते थे। चुप रहिए, शांत रहिए, कीप क्वाइट। अभी हम लोगों को आवश्यकता है डायलॉग की, जिसे बच्चा बोले टीचर सुने और दूसरे बच्चे भी सुने। That is a paradigm shift. How it can be converted from monologue to dialogue. That's my question from your side.
Correct. So what he is saying is that, I mean, our generation when we grew up, the teachers used to come to a class and teach, and if you asked a question, the teacher used to take an offense, saying that घर में संस्कार ठीक नहीं है, टीचर को आपके क्वेश्चन पूछता है. तो लेकिन that philosophy has to change, and that monologue from teacher we need to break, and we must actually have a dialogue. While having a dialogue, the teacher must also recognize he or she may have limitations, right? कभी-कभी ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि कुछ चीजें मालूम नहीं है, but that's okay. That's all of us. We are not sarvajnani, right? So as long as we accept that and we pursue a dialogue with the students, I think that's much more effective way of conveying a principle to the student than having a monologue, as what you said correctly.
Hello, sir.
Okay.
My question is, nowadays school and parents demands for the grade and marks. So, as sir you have mentioned that how as a teacher you can implement the experimental and personal learning in classroom in the school.
So grade and marks is a system, unfortunately, that we use, and unfortunately what happens is that we have a very large population, and institutions of, let us say, higher learning, where students seek to go, the seats are very few in general, in many of them, and therefore it always decided that who has a better grade, who has better marks and things like that. But at some point of time we need to learn how do we break free from that. There are certain education systems in the country, for example, those proposed by people like Jiddu Krishnamurti and all, they don't depend upon evaluating a student's capability by giving either a grade or mark or something, but rather try to develop an all-round personality in a student. but they have not been scaled up. Those education systems are very good by philosophy. Jitu Krishnamurthy's work has been very good on ground, but the thing is they have not been able to scale up. And even if we were to scale up, there will be obvious issues that will come up in seeking admissions to certain place and things like that. We have a last question and then we will go to the next speaker of this meeting.
Sir, myself Arjun Boni from Tripura, representing Northeast India, and I also awarded with National Award for Science and Technology Communication in 2022.
Wonderful.
From NCSTC. Sir, in my area, sir, in Tripura, there is in whole India also situation is same. There is a 19 tribes, and when we have to teach the science education on mathematics and different subject, we are facing language barrier. In case of this, we are using some study or classroom practices, the AI system, because in Lens there is a language converter also. In Malayalam, Telugu, we can convert these things also, but in tribal language, in case of tribal language, it is not available, sir. So if there is a system, because nowadays we are moving forward to Swadeshi system, so we are, it's my suggestion also, and I need your expert opinion also, whether we can make in such a AI system or AI app so that we can convert this or if we can adapt the tribal languages for educational purpose, we can convert this with other English or thing. That will be most helpful for the for teachers also who are basically all the teachers may not know all the languages, but if there is a system for conversion in G20 and other thing, even in this time also Russian president is here, they are also using language converter for understanding both of them. So in same thing we have to practice in our classroom also for better NEP implementation, sir.
I agree with you completely. We have a large tribal population in the country and many different kinds of tribes with their own languages, and many tribal languages don't even have scripts. Now, I had a chance to go to Jamshedpur on 15 November. 15 November is the Birsa Munda Day, and we are celebrating, as you know, it's 150 years of Birsa Munda this year. And there's a large tribal festival there happening, what is called as Samvad. And many of the tribal people had come there, and I was very happy to see that some of the younger tribal leaders had taken it up upon themselves to develop scripts for their language, and secondly, using AI tools to convert from different languages to other languages, including the tribal languages. So I believe the movement has just started. What you are asking is a very pertinent question. That movement has started, and I do hope that will take shape in the coming year or two, and I do hope that even tribals will be able to reach. After all, the aim of education is to reach the last segment of the society, right? And even the remotest person living in the remotest part of the country, we should be able to reach that person and give education what we think appropriate from our side. Thank you. I'm going to end here. I think the Dr. Saab has to speak. So
Sir, I just one line only. Sir, as you are the national president of Vigyan Bharati, it's my art, sir. Sir, please write to NCERT also.
I will.
To develop their books to into.
I will write to them, but I think I am running into his time. So.